होती है ऑस्ट्रेलिया के साथ तो कम से कम हम फाइनल में पहुंच जाते हैं।
हाँ ऑब्वियसली होता। ऑस्ट्रेलिया का होम ग्राउंड था, स्पोर्ट ने थी। फर्स्ट पॉइंट जो हमारे रहा, एक टॉस जो हम हारे, सेकंड जो कोहली नहीं चला हमारे लिए, सबसे जो रहा लो। बट इंडिया खेला, अच्छा खेला, 7 मैच जीता। बट प्रेशर दोनों तरफ था, इंडिया की तरफ था, उनकी तरफ था। बट नो डाउट हार जी चलती रहती है। इंडिया कल भी थी विन, आज भी जीतेगी, हमेशा भी जीता रहेगा।
Vishnu, there you have it. This postmortem will go on for many more days, but certainly a forgettable day for the Indian cricket fans there. Back to you.
All right, Anand, thanks very much. Well, what exactly went right for India? What exactly went wrong for India? For more on all of that, it's across now to Nikhil Naz, who's got Greg Chappell with him. Nikhil?
Well, thanks a lot for that. Yes, Vishnu, we've got Ian Chappell right next to me. Ian, okay. I don't know where to start. There was so much to talk about this game. Not a very happy Indian fan at the moment. But you said it was a 50-50 encounter. But it was anything but 50-50 today, would you say?
Yeah, 50-50, but I thought it was mainly 50-50 if India could bat first and post a decent total. Chasing a big total in knockout matches is very, very difficult. And I think, the innings that obviously the Steve Smith innings was the foundation, but the thing, and India I thought had got back very well into the match, but the thing that really cruelled them at the end was that quick fire hitting from Mitchell Johnson. That probably took the target from 300 to nearly 330. That extra 30 runs made a huge difference. 300, I think India would have felt, we've got a real chance of chasing that down. But when you've just got to put out so much to keep the run rate even level, there's always a risk. And if you're trying to do that against good bowling, eventually something's going to come unstuck. And also Australia, the other thing about Australia is they've got I know they dropped hadn't dropped the catch and so on, but they've got a very good fielding side. The catching, they're not going to give you too many chances with the catching. Someone's likely to get a run out, so that makes the target even tougher. So I thought that if they could have kept them, say, just a little under 300, would have been, then I would have thought 50-50. But the ideal thing would have been India batting first.
Okay. Because you say 300 would have put them into the game, because at the end of the day the margin of defeat has been 95 runs. Yeah. But you think you said 300 because the approach would have been different by the Indian batsmen then?
You don't have to go quite as hard, and when you're doing that against a good bowling attack, a good fielding side, and also a shrewd captain in Michael Clarke, things are going to, and Clarke makes things happen. He's not the sort of captain who sits back and allows you to get some easy runs and get 4 singles and over, and then you hit a boundary and suddenly you've got 8 and over, and you do that for 4 or 5 overs in the middle there, and that gives you some momentum. He's not the sort of captain who's going to allow you to do that. If you're good enough to do it, then that's fine, but he won't allow you to do it without any risk. And I think the other area where India got into a bit of a problem was they weren't able to take wickets in that in the middle overs, and they all summer they just haven't been able to find a way to cut Steve Smith off at the knees. He just keeps making big scores, and that was the foundation Australia wanted.
Right, you said 50-50 because you wanted India to bat first. Now, as soon as the toss happened, was it 70-30 from there on?
It slightly favoured Australia. I don't know.
Or maybe 60-40.
Yeah, who knows? But I think, winning the toss, and particularly when you've got such a long batting lineup as Australia.
Mitchell Johnson at number 9, imagine that.
Yeah, that's right, and he can hurt you, as he did in that game. And that's the problem, unless you just keep constantly taking wickets, someone's going to hurt you. But when the hurt came early from Steve Smith, and he made things easier for Finch. Finch was struggling early on. He could have been out a couple of times early on. But the fact that Smith was doing it so easily helped out Finch. And then that, what was a 182-run partnership there, that was the solid foundation. Now, with that batting lineup to come, when you've got that sort of solid foundation, these guys coming in, they can take a few risks. That's always dangerous for the opposition.
Okay, let's talk about the Australian team. Now, we talk about the Indian team and we spoke about them in depth. But it's the 7th World Cup final for Australia. I mean, what does Australia do right to make it to the final so consistently?
Well, Australia's, got a history of being a very good cricket nation. I think for a long time, it was the best system in the world. You know, I'm talking the club system, the first class system. I mean, I had the good fortune as an 18-year-old kid to play with Gary Sobers, who at that stage was the best cricketer in the world. He played 3 seasons of Sheffield Shield cricket, and he said categorically, this is the toughest cricket I've ever played outside of Test cricket. So that system, you know, kept Australian cricket very strong. The system now has been diluted a little bit, not basically through anything that Australia has done, but because the international program now impinges on the first class program. So it's not as strong as it was, but it's still probably better than most of the other systems. And I think the other thing that perhaps is underrated a bit, the Australian public is very demanding. You know, they expect...
Well, so are the Indians, actually.
Yeah, but you're demanding in a different way. You know, I've always said the big difference between Australia and India is, you know, and I used the analogy when Tendulkar was playing and Ricky Ponting was captain of Australia, so I'll stick with that analogy. With the Indians, if Tendulkar made 100 and India lost, the Indian fans, they were happy. They were okay. Probably a little sad, but mostly they were happy because Tendulkar made 100. If Ponting made a duck and Australia won, Australian fans were over the moon. And so the winning was has always been the most important thing, and the public demand it. And then through the media, you know, the public demand. So Australia, you know, there's that thing with the players, there's an expectancy. We are expected to play well, and I think that brings out the real competitive urge in Australians.
Okay, that's a very interesting analogy, I must say, Ian. Okay, now let's talk about the Indian team. Do you think that because India was doing well against some other teams, it gave a false sense of confidence to a lot of Indian fans that they do well against Australia? Because we've seen it all summers. Australia, do you think Australia has the Achilles heel of the Indian cricket team, the Australian team currently?
Yeah, I mean, when you keep winning, you know, I had a mate of mine when I used to play golf, and he always used to say, because he used to beat me, and he always said, once you've got a guy at golf, you've got him for all time. And India are probably feeling a bit like that with Australia at the moment. And I don't think it was necessarily a false hope, but yes, it was always going to be the big test. India were winning, and they were winning well, and they were playing damn good cricket, and the improvement from the start of the summer, particularly in the bowling, and particularly the fast bowling, the improvement was enormous in the Indian side. But still, the big test was always going to be, how would they go under fire when the Australians attacked them? Because you knew with that long batting lineup, Australia was going to attack them. So that was always going to be the test. And unfortunately for India, there was really no other team in the competition that was going to play them the same way that Australia would play them, so that they would have a chance to have a bit of a rehearsal in the lead up to the semi-final with Australia.
The other thing is, because I talk about the Achilles heel, sometimes we see that in individual sports. Let's take tennis, for example. You know, Roger Federer is fantastic, but when Roger Federer comes up against Rafael Nadal, he tends to lose. Is it similar with the Indian team and the Australian team? They may do well against most other teams like South Africa, they beat them, but when they come against the Australian team, and I'm just talking about the current setup, not just necessarily over the years, but the current setup, do you think this Australian team has India's number?
In Australia, yes. But then
in Australia, correct.
Yeah, but then again, I'd say the opposite in India. India has Australia's number in India. But yes, most definitely. And there is that thing. Until you beat somebody who keeps beating you, you're always just, you know, as much as you try to say, yes, we can beat them, there's still right back in the brain there somewhere, and I don't know the brain well enough, but back in that area there somewhere, there's still that question mark in your head, can we beat them? So it's, rather than we will beat them, it's can we beat them? And there's a big difference in that attitude. Okay,
the other thing is, many would talk about, did India get a real test leading into this semi-final? Australia got that. They got a bit of a scare against New Zealand when they lost, a bit of a scare against Pakistan. India had smooth sailing, many would say. Would you say that it's sometimes needed before a crunch game that you have a tough game?
I don't think it hurts, to have a tough game. Probably not the game before a semi-final, say, but somewhere in your in the league system, to have a really tough contest. To have a really tough contest when you know that if we lose, it's not the end of the competition for us. That's probably the ideal time to have it. You don't, you expect that you're going to get some tough contests in the knockout section, but it's nice to have one when you have the safety net of, well, if we lose, we're still in the competition. So, yeah, that probably is something that India could have done with a really tough contest.
Okay, now let's talk about the way India started this game. Somehow it took me back to the 2003 final. I was there, it was the big final, India-Australia, and many believe that the Indian team was a bit over-enthusiastic and they strayed a bit as far as their bowling is concerned. At that time it was Ricky Ponting who took the Indian bowling apart. This time it was Steve Smith. Did it remind you of that game?
Not really, because I think India bowled badly in 2003. Yeah, there was.
You didn't think they bowled badly this time?
No, I didn't think they. Particularly, say, the first 10 overs, even though Australia scored quite a few runs in that time, I thought India bowled very well up front. They got rid of Warner, they could easily have got rid of Finch, but that one stumbling block, which has been the same stumbling block all summer, they just, they obviously haven't been able to find a way to get the better of Steve Smith. And it happens like that in cricket, particularly when you've got to play a team a lot of times over the summer, and one guy just suddenly gets your number and he just keeps making runs and runs, and you do tend to get to a point where you sort of look at the guy and you think, how the hell do we get this fella out? And I think India were at that point with Steve Smith.
Okay, so because you said Steve Smith had a great summer against India, the other guy who had a great summer against Australia was Virat Kohli. But one would have expected that if Smith really fired today, Virat Kohli should have fired. Do you think had he not gotten out for just one, things could have been different? He was the crucial man today?
Well, you had to get a big score, and then, whether you're setting a target in a knockout match or whether you're chasing a big target, you've got to get a big score out of one of your first three, I think. And that was where, both Dhawan and Rohit Sharma, they were, particularly Dhawan, he had a couple of let-offs. You've got to take advantage of those let-offs and not take advantage by getting 40. You've got to take advantage by getting a big score, particularly when, one, you're chasing a huge target, as Australia set, but two, someone in the top three from the opposition has made 100. Someone from India's got to say, right, I'm going to match him. I'm going to match Steve Smith. And I think that was one area where India did fall down, because both Sharma and, at that stage, with the opening partnership sailing along, India looked to have, there was a bit of a worried look on Michael Clarke's face.
Yes.
And they had, and the crowd were going, the Indian crowd were going, so they had some real momentum at that point. But for Dhawan to just pick out one guy, there's one guy in an eight-pack, and to pick him out, that, I'd mark that down as a soft dismissal. When you've sort of just got your foot on the throat, then you've got to keep the foot on the throat. Don't let the so-and-sos up. And particularly when it's a really good team like Australia. You just give Australia the slightest sniff and boom, they'll bounce back up. But you've got them down there, keep that foot planted firmly on the throat.
Okay, so you've got a man down, keep him down. So that is what you're talking about when India had the opportunity to keep Australia down while batting. Now let's go back a bit. India also had the opportunity to keep Australia down while they were batting towards that middle stage when they picked up a few wickets and Clarke and Watson came. Do you think at that time also they took the foot off the pedal?
No, I don't think they took the foot off the pedal. I think it was just the fact that batting lineup is so long.
Okay, so not much you think the Indian team could have done?
No, not much.
So you were looking at 320 irrespective? From there on, when they
I thought when they got those 4 quick wickets in the middle, then I thought they could keep Australia to 300. But it was that quick fire, 28 off 9 balls or something like that from Mitchell Johnson, that cruelled them, really. If they... And I suppose one crucial part there was Kohli dropping that catch. Yes. You take that catch, not only is it a dot ball, but, you've got another wicket fall, so then Mitchell Johnson's, hang on, I better just perhaps play a couple of balls and have a look. We can't afford to lose another wicket, rather than the catch goes down and he says, Oh, right. That India have given us a bit of a break here, and I'll take my chances. So that could have changed things if Kohli takes that catch in the outfield.
Okay, trust me, I heard a few Indian fans being very disappointed when Clark and Watson got out because they knew Mitchell Johnson is coming. They wanted Clark and Watson to bat on till the 50 overs. Okay, we'll have to wrap up this discussion. Lots more coming up with Ian Chappell. We'll also listen in to the Indian captain MS Dhoni in that live press conference, but all that coming away after this short break.
Yeah, that will be the fact. So, you know, it's up to you guys.